Hello there. Would you believe it? That arch-Europhile, the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, will ban migrants from claiming asylum in Poland. If this doesn't prove that the EU is completely dysfunctional where border controls are concerned, then nothing will. Donald Tusk was one of those who bleated during the Brexit years that the UK can't cherry-pick terms. You are either in or out, he said. But Donald Tusk now wants to cherry-pick immigration and asylum seeker laws, because Warsaw must regain 100% control over who comes to Poland, he said. Now that's something you won't hear from the UK Lib-Lab Green Con, isn't it? In fact, according to the BBC, the government is advertising a 6-year contract worth £521 million to manage 2 sites in Kent used to process migrants arriving in the UK on small boats. That doesn't sound to me like there'll be any smashing of the people smuggling gangs by Labour anytime soon. Anyway, the main driver for Tusk taking a hard line is that Poland claims that Russia and Belarus are pushing migrants, mainly from the Middle East and Africa, to the Polish border in order to get them into the EU to foment unrest. With DW.com reporting, faced with a new wave of illegal border crossings from Belarus, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk reportedly pledged a merciless fight against illegal migration. Tusk also called for suspending the right to asylum. Merciless, eh? That sounds ominous. And according to Tusk himself, if there are too many people of other cultures, then the native culture feels threatened. Not so sure that Brussels agrees with him, nor the vocal woke lefty types. Although other member states at a proletariat population level are getting distinctly uncomfortable with the increasing surge of newcomers. Newcomers that are proving hard to deport should they prove undesirable. With the harder to shift being those who claim asylum and then either commit crimes or refuse to integrate and respect the ways of their host country. If someone wants to come to Poland, they must respect Polish standards, Polish customs. They must want to integrate, Tusk went on. Oh, that a UK Prime Minister would say such a thing here. But for our politicians, it's all about the majority Brits giving up their culture to then fit in with the needs and wants of the newcomers. A total reverse of what should be happening. Now, just a quick reminder to please like this video, subscribe to the channel and comment below. It seems that if I don't ask, I don't get. And while I'm on a roll, please sign the pledge and support Tommy. Links in the descriptions box below. Now, one assumes that the European Union will not be pleased with Poland's attempt to play hardball with asylum seeking, especially as they've just reformed their border controls. But Tusk is claiming that Russia and Belarus are using the mass movement of people across the borders into Europe as a disruptor, a sort of hybrid war. Something that might get the Eurocrats to accept Tusk's proposals. With Politico reporting, tens of thousands of would-be immigrants, many from the Middle East and Africa, have attempted to cross the border into Poland via Belarus in recent years, with as many as 2,500 reported last month and more than 26,000 so far this year. And Poland, just like the UK, is a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights. But it seems that the UK is the only one tied down by the ECHR due to Tony Blair's Human Rights Act that pulls the whole convention into UK law. Oh, and just to remind you, dear viewers, the EU, as a separate body in Brussels that rules over the EU member states, it continues to breach its own international law treaties by refusing to accede to the ECHR. Now, Poland and the Czech Republic recently lambasted countries like Austria, Denmark, France, Italy, Norway, Slovenia, Sweden and Finland for imposing border controls within the EU, basically interrupting the Schengen area, because they want to see EU outer borders strengthened and EU internal borders eradicated. Well, Tusk is a long-term Europhile who wants an EU empire, isn't he? And getting rid of internal border controls would presumably make it easier to disperse certain people from Poland into the rest of the EU. And in other signs that Poland is worried, it has recently pushed its defence spending up to 4.7% of GDP, over double the NATO requirement of 2%. And the EU's response to this was to open an excess deficit procedure against Poland because it is now running a fiscal gap of 5.7% instead of the upper limit of 3%. Even though what Poland is doing is beefing up European Union defence, something I thought the EU Commission was all for. Anyway, it does seem that Russia and Belarus are successfully putting pressure on the cohesion of the European Union. A European Union that does not know what to do about immigration other than leave the borders wide open, and won't allow increased defence spending unless it falls within its fiscal rules, thus showing that an emergency increase in defence spending to deter a potential aggressor would only lead to EU bureaucratic sanctions. Now, the immigration position taken by Poland's government is in stark contrast to that of Ireland's government. Despite any feelings the Irish people might have about it, the Irish government has really turned the immigration and asylum seeker taps on, to the extent that, according to the EU Commission, the Irish population grew by a staggering 3.5% last year, or by an extra 183,000 people. Makes the UK's 1% population growth seem puny by comparison. And although Ireland still has more births than deaths, the natural increase was only 19,000 people. The rest was from inward migration. And it doesn't look to me like that will be stopping anytime soon, because it is a choice the political classes are making on behalf of the Irish people. But it just illustrates how fragmented the EU member state governments are on the issue of mass migration. But not only fragmented between each other, but many are fragmented from their own voters on the issue. Many politicians in the West would rather look all woke on the world stage when amongst their fellow politicians than be looked on kindly by their own voters and taxpayers. They are the ones who sign us up to these onerous new treaties, or flat out refuse to leave treaties that actually damage their nation in case their political mates call them racist. And in the end, they are left with the only option of either changing tack to follow the wishes of their voters, or embark on lefty woke psychological mind nudging to try and steer the masses along the correct path. And then, if that fails, outright tyranny, something we see Free Gear Kia experimenting with at the moment. It's only a small number of countries where governments are recognising that mass movement of people really does pose cultural and financial problems for settled populations, those like us in the UK. But most Western governments seem oblivious to this truth. Either that, or they are actively engaging in a higher level game of destroying their own communities to form something else. And if the latter is true, and I will point out this is happening across the developed world in what can only be viewed as a coordinated operation, it shows that governments are hiding their true intent from their own people, because they know their own voters and taxpayers would not like where they are being led like cattle. Better to not tell us and make out it's a series of worldwide events that are out of anyone's control that is leading us to their final destination of choice. This will not end well if we let them do it.